おとなしそうな顔してやるわね、あんたも。
ベル君、君ってやつ。
Bell is an ugly, worthless loser who finds himself about to get nerfed, but luckily he's saved by a baddie who makes him want to get ripped so he can clap her. Eventually, he becomes OP, and all the baddies want a taste of his meat. However, before any of this, inside the dungeon, Cranel, the lone member of the Hestia familia, finds himself in a desperate situation, being chased by a minotaur. Just when all hope seems lost, a hot girl with long golden hair, Aiz Wallenstein, swoops in and saves his bacon. Covered in minotaur blood, Bell returns to the city and hits up his guild advisor, Aina, for the lowdown on his mysterious savior. Aina fills him in. Aiz is one of Orario's strongest swordsmen, almost OP like a demon slayer, a member of the Loki familia, and has earned the coveted title Sword Princess from the gods themselves. Aina also drops some sage advice. If Bell wants to catch Aiz's eye, he needs to step up his game and get jacked. Fired up, Bell decides to put in the extra effort to rizz up Aiz in the dungeon. Back at the Hestia familia, Bell is greeted by his goddess Hestia, who updates his status and reveals a sweet new skill, Liaris Frisi, which accelerates his growth. But she decides to keep this juicy tidbit on the down low from Bell. The next morning, Bell heads back to the dungeon, still pumped from his encounter with Aiz. On his way, he runs into a waifu who returns a magic stone he dropped earlier, and she even throws in a lunchbox and an invite to her pub for later that night so they can get wasted. In the dungeon, Bell's still simping on Aiz, and he's on a roll taking down monsters left and right and racking up magic stones and treasures. When he gets back home, he's stoked to see his stats have gotten a major boost thanks to his new skill. Later that night, Bell meets up with the waifu from earlier, Sirflova, at her pub, and they start getting wasted. Just as he's relaxing, the Loki familia walks in, including the hot Aiz. But Bell's excitement is short-lived when Beat, one of the Loki members, starts teasing him about running away from the Minotaur the day before. Determined to prove himself, Bell heads back to the dungeon to blow off some steam and take on more monsters. The next morning, Bell shows up at Hestia's place, battered and bruised, and confesses that his ultimate goal is to become a total boss, just like Goku.
僕、強くなりたいです。
Hestia gives Bell's status a refresh and can't help but notice his crazy fast growth rate thanks to his rare skill, Liaris Frisi. But she decides to keep this juicy info on low-key from Bell. Later, Hestia breaks the news to Bell that she'll be taking a short trip out of town for a few days. Little does Bell know, Hestia is actually heading to the gods' banquet, where she rubs shoulders with other gods and goddesses. She takes the opportunity to hit up Hephaestus, asking her to whip up a weapon for Bell. After some serious begging, Hephaestus agrees to craft a weapon for Bell, but not before making it clear that Hestia will have to pay her back, no matter how long it takes. The next day, Bell runs into Anya, a pub employee who asks him to do a favor, deliver a wallet to Seer at the Monsterphilia Festival. This annual shindig, hosted by the Ganesha Familia, is all about showcasing tame monsters brought back from the dungeon. After putting in some serious work, Hephaestus finally finishes crafting Bell's new weapon and hands it over to Hestia to deliver to him. Meanwhile, at the Monsterphilia Festival, Loki and Freya are having a hush-hush meeting on a balcony, discussing some kid from another familia that Freya's got her eye on. But when Freya spots Bell in the crowd, she suddenly bails. Bell's on a mission to find Seer, and instead, he runs into Hestia, who jokingly tells him to clap her cheeks like a demon slayer. Their little date gets cut short when a massive silverback monster suddenly shows up in the Colosseum. The monster's orders are to chase Hestia down, so Bell and Hestia make a break for it. Cornered on Daedalus Street, Hestia's in serious danger, but Bell refuses to let anything happen to her. He steps up to protect her, taking on the monster and locking Hestia safely in a tunnel. He's determined not to lose anyone else he cares about. As Bell gets ready to face the monster solo, he flashes back to how his grandfather's death inspired him to become an adventurer.
決めたよ、おじいちゃん。僕、冒険者になる。
With Hestia being the only family he has left, he's determined to protect her at all costs. He takes a deep breath and heads off to confront the Silverback. Meanwhile, back at the Monsterphilia Coliseum, Ganesha is calling in favors from other familias to lend a hand. Bell, on the other hand, is in the thick of battle with the Silverback, but his dagger suddenly snaps in two. Just as he's about to get overwhelmed, Hestia bursts out of the tunnel to help him out. Elsewhere, Misha and Aina are filling Aiz in on the monster chaos, but Bell's not counting on her to save the day this time. Cornered by the Silverback, Bell's ready to face his maker. But just as all hope seems lost, Hestia shows up and distracts the monster, giving Bell the chance to grab her and make a break for it. They tumble down a flight of stairs, with the Silverback hot on their heels. Bell scoops up Hestia and makes a beeline for a hidden alleyway, where Hestia hands him his brand new knife, just in time to take on the monster once again. Meanwhile, Aiz is taking down monsters left and right when she gets the scoop about a Silverback chasing down a young adventurer on Daedalus Street. She hightails it to the scene in a flash. Back on Daedalus Street, Hestia is working her magic, enchanting Bell's new knife with her own blood and giving his stats a major boost. With his new gear in hand, Bell charges headfirst into battle against the Silverback. In a series of epic moves, he accidentally destroys one of the monster's chains, followed by a flurry of attacks that smash its face mask and armor to bits. Finally, he lands the killing blow, stabbing the beast in the chest. The crowd goes wild, cheering Bell on. Aiz watches from a distance, impressed by Bell's skills, while Hestia collapses from exhaustion. But, unbeknownst to everyone, a mysterious figure, Freya, dressed in a sleek black cloak like an Anbu black op, is perched on a rooftop, revealing that she's the mastermind behind the monster's escape. After the dust settles, Bell and Hestia crash at the pub, still reeling from their close call. Seer approaches Bell, looking pretty sheepish, and apologizes for getting him mixed up in the whole monster mess. Meanwhile, Hestia comes to, still a bit dazed from her earlier fainting spell. She reveals to Bell that she custom-crafted the knife just for him after noticing how obsessed he was with the knives at Hephaestus's store. Bell's eyes well up with tears, touched by Hestia's thoughtfulness and faith in him. Elsewhere, in the dungeon, an adventurer named Ged and his trusty porter, Lily, are on a mission to explore the depths of the labyrinth. At the guild, Aina is initially hesitant to give Bell the green light to explore the 7th floor of the dungeon, but when she sees his freshly updated stats, she does a 180 and gives him the thumbs up, on one condition: he needs to gear up with some decent armor first. The next morning, Bell and Aina head to Hephaestus's shop, where Bell is surprised to find Hestia working her magic. He introduces Aina to Hestia, and Hestia playfully warns her not to use her charms to get Bell to start clapping her cheeks. After that, Aina takes Bell to the novice blacksmith floor, where he finds some affordable armor options. He ends up buying a lightweight set made by Krotzo. With the armor situation sorted, Aina advises Bell to hire a supporter, emphasizing the risks of flying solo as an adventurer. As the day winds down, Bell and Aina part ways, and she gifts him a sweet bracer. On his way home, Bell stumbles upon an altercation between Ged and his supporter, Lily. Bell steps in to stop Ged from attacking Lily, and Ryu shows up to defuse the tension. The next day, Bell suits up in his new armor and rocks the bracer from Aina, ready to take on the dungeon. He runs into Lily, who offers to be his supporter. Bell agrees to observe her for a day before making a decision. Together, they take on a pack of killer ants, with Lily providing super helpful feedback during the fight. Lily lets slip that she's part of the Soma Familia. Back at the guild, Bell does some digging on the Soma Familia. Aina fills him in. They're all about exploring the dungeon, and fun fact, they also sell booze on the side. But Bell suddenly realizes his knife is MIA.
ナイフはどうしたの？
Meanwhile, Lily tries to pawn off Bell's knife, but the offered price is laughable. Ryu and Seer confront Lily, demanding to see the knife she's got. Lily makes a break for it, but runs into Bell, who retrieves his knife without realizing Lily was the thief. Seer gives Lily a stern warning not to misbehave again. Alone with Lily, Bell proposes they team up to explore the dungeon the next day. They agree to split the spoils 50-50. Elsewhere, Aiz and her buddy Riveria are battling some unknown monster, while Freya is plotting to uncover Bell's true power. Hestia vents to Miak over drinks at a bar, frustrated that Bell and Lily seem to be having plot The next day, Hestia wakes up with a pounding hangover, and Bel offers to take her out for a meal with his recent dungeon earnings. Hestia misinterprets this as a date and freaks out, rushing to the temple to get dolled up.
相変わらず大きいわね。
She announces to everyone that she's got a date, and the other goddesses can't help but swoon. As evening falls, Bel waits for Hestia at their agreed spot. But when she shows up, all the goddesses from the temple bath are simping on him. Hestia and Bel make a quick escape, hiding out in the bell tower, where they're treated to a stunning view of the Babel Tower. Meanwhile, Lily gets her cash stolen by Kanu, a fellow Soma Familia member, and vows to get her hands on Bel's knife again. The next day at the guild, Misha and Aina chat about how the Soma Familia members are suddenly desperate for cash. Elsewhere in the dungeon, Bel and Lily team up to take down a swarm of killer ants, with Lily's magic knife saving the day. After the battle, Bel thanks Lily for saving his life. Over lunch, Lily asks Bel for a day off to attend a Soma Familia meeting, and he agrees. With a free day on his hands, Bel borrows a magic book from Seer to get his read on. As he dives into the book, he finally understands how magic really works, and can't wait to put it into practice. That night, Hestia wakes Bel up from his snooze fest and gives him a status update. To their surprise, Bel can now cast Firebolt magic.
魔法が発現した。
Hestia reveals that Bel's magic is chantless and suggests he try it out in the dungeon the next day. Bel's too stoked to sleep, so he sneaks out in the middle of the night to test his new skills. He unleashes his firebolt magic on a pack of goblins, but gets a bit too carried away and passes out from exhaustion. Riveria and Aiz stumble upon him lying unconscious on the ground.
お母さん。
ごめんね。私は君のお母さんじゃない。
When Bel comes to, he's lying on Aiz's lap and makes a quick exit, feeling super embarrassed. Back home, Bel regrets bailing on Aiz again. His cries wake up Hestia, who's shocked to discover that the magic book Bel was reading is actually a super rare and expensive grimoire. Meanwhile, Aina runs into Loki and Riveria at the store and decides to splurge on some pricey Soma wine for Loki so she can fill her in about the Soma Familia. It turns out that the Soma Familia doesn't worship Soma, but the wine itself. Elsewhere, Lily heads to her usual meetup spot with Bel, but Kanu jumps her. Bel intervenes, but Ged, Lily's old partner, stops him. Ged proposes that Bel team up with him to steal cash from Lily, but Bel's not down with that plan. Lily's flashback reveals the harsh reality she faced after her parents' death, with adventurers taking advantage of her. No wonder her hatred for them grew stronger, and she started seeing them as bad news. Meanwhile, back at Twilight Manor, Loki's enjoying her Soma wine and spilling some juicy info to Aina. Apparently, the Soma wine sold on the market is a total fail. It's not the real deal. The good stuff is reserved for the Soma Familia kids only. That's why they're always hustling for cash so they can indulge. Over at the Hestia Familia, Bel asks Hestia if Lily can crash with them, but Hestia's not buying it. She thinks Lily's got an ulterior motive and warns Bel not to trust her.
今までの君の話を聞く限り、彼女はどうもきな臭いんだ。
The next day, Bel heads into the dungeon with Lily, who suggests they start at level 10. Bel's hesitant at first, but eventually agrees. Lily hands him a baselard, and he's forced to ditch his knife from the bracer to make room for it. While they're dungeon diving, Aina's doing an inspection and runs into Aiz. They overhear some Soma Familia members chatting about how Lily's gonna scam another unsuspecting adventurer, aka Bel. Aina asks Aiz for backup, knowing they need to intervene ASAP. Bel and Lily are crushing it on the 10th level of the dungeon, taking down Orsi's left and right. Bel's got his Baselard and Firebolt spell on lock. But things take a dark turn when Lily vanishes and Bel finds himself surrounded by monster lures. A bunch of orcs show up and Bel tries to defend himself, but Lily snatches his knife and bails on him. As Lily makes her way out of the dungeon, she ditches her beastman ears and plans to sell Bel's knife. But Ged catches up to her, beats her up, and takes all her weapons. Just as Ged thinks he's got the upper hand, Kanu and his crew show up, unleashing a swarm of killer ant corpses on him. Ged tries to make a break for it, but the ants get him in the end. Kanu makes a deal with Lily, letting her off the hook in exchange for the key to her gnome lockbox. But Kanu's got no intention of keeping his word, using Lily as a decoy to make their escape. Lily's left feeling helpless and regretful, realizing her hatred for adventurers has led her to this mess. She's about to give up when Belle suddenly appears, casting a firebolt spell to take out the ants. Meanwhile, Aina's trying to convince Hestia to get Belle to ditch Lily, but Hestia's got Belle's back. She knows he's all about standing on business for Lily, no matter what. Belle's too busy fighting off the remaining killer ants to worry about that though. He rescues Lily, and she's overcome with emotion, asking why he bothered saving her. Belle's response? He did it because he wants to see her massive plots, and that's all that matters. Belle's all about forgiveness, and he introduces Lily to Hestia, putting the past behind them. As Belle brews some tea, Hestia and Lily have a heart-to-heart about Lily's commitment to the Familia. Lily promises to never betray Belle again, and it's a fresh start for everyone.
ティア様にもう決して裏切りません。
At the guild, Belle runs into Aina chatting with Aiz. Aiz pulls him aside and reveals that she's the one who saved him from getting cooked by orcs in the dungeon. She returns his bracer and Belle's stoked. Aiz offers to teach Belle some sweet combat skills to help him level up. The next morning, Belle and Aiz meet at the city's highest point for a training sesh. They decide to spar, going at it until daybreak. Meanwhile, in the dungeon, Attar's taking on a group of minotaurs. He's impressed by one of them wielding a blood-soaked weapon, so he destroys it and hooks the minotaur up with a new one to master. On their day off, Belle and Lily plan to explore the 10th level of the dungeon, but things get real when they stumble upon a bunch of imps. With Lily's help, Belle takes them down. Then, orcs show up, and the remaining imps join forces with them. Lily suggests they bail, but Belle's determined to reach Aiz's level of awesomeness. The next day, Belle meets up with Aiz for another intense sparring session. Let's just say Belle gets knocked out multiple times. Aiz is impressed though and asks how Belle's getting so strong so fast. Belle confesses that he wants to become strong enough to have some plot with a certain someone.
ただ、どうしても追いつきたい人がいて。
Meanwhile, in the dungeon, Attar's still going at it with that Minotaur. He finally wraps things up, but not before the Minotaur's weapon gets busted. Later that evening, Belle and Aiz stroll home, stopping at a food stall along the way. And guess who's working there? Hestia. She's not thrilled to see Aiz though, and gives Belle a hard time for always trying to have plot with different people. But she lets them off the hook, warning Aiz not to make a move on Belle. The next day at the guild, Belle's jaw drops when he finds out that Aiz just solo slayed a boss creature on the 37th dungeon level. Like, what even is that? To take his mind off Aiz's awesomeness, Belle agrees to help Seer with the dishes at the pub. Ryu joins in, and as they scrub away, Belle asks for her advice on leveling up. Ryu's all about Belle improving his skills, tactics, and taking down powerful opponents. She also suggests forming a party to cover his weaknesses. The next day is the last day of Belle's training with Aiz. During their spar, Belle finally lands a counterattack on her. As they part ways, Belle's all about reaching her level someday. Back home, Belle's getting ready for another dungeon adventure, but he's too hyped to check his new stats. He's all about the hustle, no time to waste. Meanwhile, the Loki Familia's gearing up for a dungeon expedition, aiming to hit the 59th level. Belle and Lily are making their way through the dungeon, reaching the 9th level, when suddenly they're ambushed by a one-horned Minotaur wielding Attar's weapon. Belle dodges the attack with Lily's help, but the Minotaur's too powerful, slamming Belle into a wall and injuring him. Down in the lower levels, Finn's group catches wind of the Minotaur on the 9th level and rushes to help. Belle tells Lily to bail and he faces the beast alone. Just when it looks like the Minotaur's about to finish him off, Aiz shows up, ready to save the day. But Belle's all about fighting his own battles, so he asks Aiz to stand down and let him cook.
もう、アイズ・バレンシュタインに助けられるわけにはいかないんだ!
Beat jumps in to help, and Belle regains his composure, landing some solid attacks. Despite struggling to penetrate the Minotaur's defenses, Belle manages to stab its arm, rendering it useless. He finishes it off with a barrage of firebolt spells. After the fight, Belle passes out on his feet. At Beat's request, Riveria checks Belle's stats, and the verdict is in: Belle's officially S-ranked.
Ability all S.
The next day, Belle shares the news with Aina that he's leveled up to 2 and she's stoked for him. Later, Hestia checks Belle's stats and discovers he's got a new skill called Argonaut. Hestia's got to bounce though, to attend the quarterly god gathering, Denatius Day. where they're supposed to decide on a second name for Belle. When she gets back, she lets Belle know that his new moniker is Little Rookie.
リトルルーキーそれがベル様の二つなんですか
To celebrate Belle's achievement, the gang throws a party at the pub. Belle shares his plans with Ryu to tackle the middle levels of the dungeon, and she advises him to stop at the 13th level, since the monsters beyond that point are way too tough for him to handle solo. She suggests forming a party to take on the challenge. The next day, Belle swings by the Hephaestus Familia and asks the shopkeeper if they've got a set of armor by Welf Krotzo. Lucky for him, Welf's in the store and offers Belle a sweet deal. He'll forge new gear for Belle if he joins Belle's party. The next day, Belle, Lily, and Welf venture into the 10th floor of the dungeon. As Lily's chatting about Welf's family history, imps and orcs suddenly pop out of the ground. During the battle, Belle realizes he's gotten way faster. Just when a hard-armored monster's about to attack, Belle takes it down with his trusty firebolt attack.
アイズ・バレンシュタインに
Meanwhile, Aiz and her team are fighting off a bunch of flame rocks. Back with Belle's group, they're waiting for Lily to finish collecting magic stones. While Welf's gazing on Belle, he notices a sparkling light on Belle's arm just before an infant dragon appears and starts chasing Lily. Belle saves the day with his firebolt magic, taking down the dragon. Back home, Hestia fills Belle in on the sparkling light. It's from his new Argonaut skill. The next day, Welf takes Belle to his blacksmith workspace to whip up some new gear. Belle spots a sword hanging on the wall and decides to give it a try. He's impressed. Welf notices Belle's carrying a minotaur horn and decides to use it as material for Belle's new knife. The next day, Belle says his goodbyes to Hestia as he heads into the mid-levels of the dungeon. At the same time, Takemikazuchi, another god, sees off his familia as they venture into the dungeon too. Hestia meets up with Takemikazuchi and they chat about their respective familias exploring the dungeon at the same time. Suddenly, a small earthquake hits and Hestia's worried about Belle's safety.
地震たまたま続いてるだけだとは思うけど
Inside the dungeon, Belle's party faces off against a group of hellhounds. After taking them down, they encounter a bunch of Almiraj. Meanwhile, Takemikazuchi's familia is fleeing from another group of Almiraj while carrying a wounded party member. Their leader, Mikoto, turns back to take down the pursuing Almiraj. Soon after, they're chased by a small pack of hellhounds. Belle's party is fighting off a large group of Almiraj when Takemikazuchi's familia runs past them, followed by the hellhounds. The Almiraj and hellhounds create total chaos, forcing Belle's group to flee into a narrow hallway. Belle uses his firebolt spell to take down two hellhounds, while Welf takes down another. Unfortunately, Welf gets hurt in the process, injuring his left arm. Just when they think it's all over, more monsters spawn from the roof of the dungeon floor, causing it to collapse. Welf's ankle gets caught under a rock and things are looking grim. After arriving in the dungeon, Ryu and Asfi kick some serious monster butt, taking down a bunch of Almiraj and hellhounds. Once they've cleared the area, they move forward until they hit a roadblock, literally a cave-in. Hestia discovers one of Belle's weapons buried in the rubble, and Ryu finds some monster stones and empty potion vials on top of the pile. Asfi figures out that Belle's group is probably headed to the safe zone on the 18th level.
地上を目指すという選択肢を捨て、あえて安全地帯である18階層へ向かったのではないでしょうか。
Meanwhile, Welf's having a rough time. He's been overusing Will-O-Wisp, which leaves him struggling with Mind Down, and Lily passes out cold. Belle finds himself playing hero, helping his two friends through the dungeon as they make their way to the 17th level. When they finally reach the exit to the 18th floor, Belle catches a glimpse of the floor boss spawning, but he manages to dodge it and make it to the next level. On the 18th floor, Belle runs into Aiz and begs her to help his friends. Later, he wakes up in a tent to find Aiz telling him that Riveria and her crew have healed Welf and Lily. Aiz then takes Belle to meet her captain Finn, and Belle thanks him profusely, offering to return the favor somehow.
ミノタウロスを仕留めたことといい、やるじゃないあんた。
Next, Aiz takes Belle to the Labyrinth Utopia, aka the Under Resort, where a massive tree with glowing crystals towers above them. Aiz explains that as time passes, the light will fade, and the place will get dark and creepy. That night, Welf and Lily finally wake up, and Aiz lets them know that dinner is about to be served. As Belle and the gang chow down on dinner with the Loki familia, Hestia and her search party burst onto the scene. Hestia is over the moon to see Belle safe and sound. Hermes takes takes the opportunity to introduce himself and the members of Takemikazuchi's familia to Belle. Mikoto also apologizes to Belle for her past mistakes, and he graciously forgives her. Asfi then fills everyone in on the plan. They'll head back to the surface once the Loki familia takes down the Goliath on the 17th floor. Hermes suggests they take it easy the next day, and everyone's more than happy to agree. Later, Hestia hands Welf a gift from Hephaestus, along with a sweet note from the goddess herself. As the group winds down for the night, Belle has a heart-to-heart with Aiz under the stunning crystal tree. She promises to show him the secret city hidden within the dungeon the next day, and Belle can barely contain his excitement. The next day, Aiz takes Belle and the whole crew on a tour of the hidden town within the dungeon. But things quickly take a turn when Belle runs into the guy who confronted him at the bar a while back, and they get into a heated argument. Luckily, Aiz steps in and puts a stop to it before things get out of hand. As the others explore the town, Belle has a deep conversation with Ryu. She opens up about her past, revealing how she was blacklisted by the guild after taking revenge on an enemy familia that hurt her comrades. Seer took her in after that, and that's how she ended up working at the pub.
自分を貶めるような真似はやめてください。僕も怒ります。
Meanwhile, back in Riviera, Mord, the guy who had a beef with Belle, starts plotting his next move. He's soon joined by a mysterious dude who's hard to pin down. The next day, Belle and Aiz discuss their plan to head back to the surface. Hestia watches their conversation from the sidelines. But things take a dark turn when an invisible enemy snatches her. The enemy leaves a note for Belle, and he immediately springs into action, racing to the location indicated. That's where he finds Mord and his crew waiting for him. Mord challenges Belle to a one-on-one duel with some pretty steep stakes. If Mord wins, he gets to take all of Belle's stuff. If Belle wins, he gets his goddess back. The duel between Belle and Mord gets underway, with Mord using his sneaky invisibility tactic to try and take Belle down. But little does Belle know, Hermes and Asfi are watching from the sidelines, having orchestrated the whole thing to show Belle the other side of his experiences so far. Just as things are heating up, Welf arrives on the scene with the Takemikazuchi familia crew, and they jump into battle against Mord's companions. Meanwhile, Hestia manages to break free from her captors with Lily's help. Back on the battlefield, Welf loses the sweet gift Hephaestus gave him, but Ryu shows up just in time to lend a hand. Belle, on the other hand, is getting pummeled by the invisible Mord, but somehow he instinctively dodges the final blow.
感じる敵の視線を
With his eyes closed, Belle starts to dodge Mord's attacks with ease, which only annoys Mord more. Mord gets fed up and draws his sword, but Belle is ready for him. He uses the powder from a smashed crystal to temporarily blind Mord, then breaks his sword with his trusty duo blades and delivers a solid kick to the face, making Mord visible again. Just as Mord is about to launch another attack, Hestia steps in and unleashes her divine power, taking him down for good. But the drama doesn't end there. The ground starts shaking, and the ceiling of the level begins to crack open, revealing a whole new level of chaos. As the ceiling breaks apart, the Black Goliath, the level's boss, emerges from the wreckage. Belle, Ryu, and the gang step up to face it, leaving Hestia behind to catch her breath. Meanwhile, Mord and his crew find themselves surrounded by minotaurs, but Lily swoops in to rescue them just in time. Back in Rivera, Asfi meets up with Bors and his team, rallying everyone to join forces and take down the monster. The only way to escape the floor is to defeat the Black Goliath, so they get to work. Ryu and the gang launch a series of attacks on the Black Goliath, but it's like trying to dent a tank. Nothing seems to faze it. Asfi takes matters into her own hands, becoming a decoy to distract the Goliath, while Bor's crew buys time for the mages to power up and cast a massive spell. When the mages are ready, they unleash their individual spells on the Black Goliath, dealing some serious damage. But of course, the Goliath just regenerates and comes back swinging. With the Black Goliath counterattacking and monsters closing in from all sides, Belle takes down a Minotaur to clear some space. Ryu and Asfi hatch a plan to act as decoys again, drawing the Goliath's attention while the mages prep for another round of spells. They'll keep at it until the Goliath finally goes down for good. Lily reunites with Hestia and gets to work gathering all the supplies they can find. Meanwhile, Ryu's still struggling to take down the Black Goliath, which just won't stay dead thanks to its crazy regeneration abilities. Chigusa manages to catch up with Uka and hands over the shield she was carrying. Bell, determined to take down the beast, charges up his right hand with his Argonaut skill and unleashes a firebolt at the Black Goliath. The blast blows off the top of the monster's head, but it still manages to fire a roar blast that sends Bell flying into the air. The Black Goliath quickly regenerates its head and continues its attack, knocking Bell out cold. Hestia tries to rouse Bell, but he's too badly hurt to respond, even though he can hear her voice. Just when it seems like all hope is lost, Hermes shows up and quotes one of Bell's grandfather's phrases,
願いを貫き思いを叫ぶのだ
which somehow snaps him back to life. Bell springs into action, ready to take on the Black Goliath once again. Asfi blinds the monster, Ryu hits it with a blast of luminous wind, and Mikoto briefly restrains it, giving Welf the chance to strike with his magical sword, Kazuki. Bell seizes the opportunity to land a hero's strike, and then finishes off the Black Goliath with his trusty knife. The whole group erupts in cheers as Bell emerges victorious, and Hermes declares him the lost hero. It's a moment of pure triumph, and Bell's finally getting the recognition he deserves.